I have back one of my actual favorite guests that I've had on before. I was just on his show, Adam Liskor. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much for inviting me back to talk about something really interesting. And no, it was such a good time having you on the show with Noah, Kalina, and I on our show, All Consuming, to talk about cameras. Obviously, your area of expertise, and a lot of people liked it. We got good feedback.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Well, and it was especially exciting because we could do it in person. So, you and I got to meet for the first time. That was nice. Yep. So it seemed like good follow-up to your episode, which obviously anybody listening should go check out, All Consuming, which I don't know if you caught it, but in my 2022 wrap-up, here's my favorite stuff of the year. You guys were my podcast choice for the whole year. So hopefully people are already familiar with it.
Thank you, Tyler.
And so anybody that doesn't know Adam and his work, his company is Sandwich Video. You make the best commercials on the internet. And I don't know, you've also just been around the internet since I started caring about it in a lot of ways. And I've always appreciated your podcasts and not only your creative work, but that you're not just putting things out, but you're thinking about it and talking about it in open sometimes, which I love seeing those peeks behind the scenes. And today, the big topic that I've been delaying for too long is that we want to talk a bit about AI. Which I'm almost nervous approaching it because it's been kind of humming in the background of every other episode that I've done. I make allusions to it in videos, but I've been it's too daunting to tackle the whole thing all at once. But that's what I want us to try to do in this episode. Where are we going?
Yeah, I allude to it on my podcast as well, but Noah just does not want to talk about it. He is not a fan. He's kind of real grumpy about it. So it's always with hesitation that I bring up anything related. So I've been looking for this format to talk out my thoughts. And you're a very smart person with a ton of insight on what's happening in tech. So I think this will be fun.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. It's going to get real artificial.
I'd also love to dig in with, not that he'd want to, but with Noah about why he doesn't want to talk about it, because I actually think that's kind of a common sentiment. Looking at my Twitter feed, every 2 or 3 tweets seems to be about, and you're not doing Twitter anymore, so maybe it's different over on Mastodon or whatever, if you're on any feed-based platforms at the moment. But half the comments are about new AI announcements, and the other half are about how they're sick of hearing about AI. And I'm still a little, I get that people maybe don't like it, they don't like the results of AI, but the attitude of I'm just tired of hearing about it. Talk about something else. This is old news. I can't wrap my head around that. I kind of don't know where that feeling is coming from. Not that they'd say it's old news.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's an exhaustion, I think, with that people associate with a hype cycle, and potentially some of it is PTSD from the NFT hype cycle, from the crypto hype cycle, because there was so much of that. And it's possible that there's this feeling of this again, or they got burned the first time around. I got very excited about blockchain stuff and NFTs, and then it was super annoying all at once. And I think that the exhaustion is probably from people who haven't really touched the potential of it yet, or haven't connected with the vision yet. And let's be clear, not everybody does, and that's okay. That's really okay if you don't see the vision yet. Eventually, I think you will, and it doesn't feel like it's built on artifice like the NFT phenomenon was, where it was everything was promise and vision of an unknown, and they never really materialized.
Overpromise and underdeliver.
Exactly. And every bit of what we've seen in AI development, which is happening incredibly quickly for the past few months especially, has been neutral promise and way over deliver. And people who care about it are using the tools and saying repeatedly to themselves over and over every day, holy shit, it just did that. And then there was an update. And I remember this. So I've been a Tesla driver for many years. And, that was kind of the first car that had a firmware update over the cloud, over the air from the cloud. And I would use autopilot, the thing that steers for you and accelerates and decelerates for you. And I remember when I first got the car, it worked pretty good. And then there was an over-the-air update, and then it worked a lot better. And I was like, wow, my car just learned something. And that was AI. Yeah, obviously that was AI. That was like the machine learning improving on itself. But I just think, right now, people who get it are really, really getting it and really excited. And it's overwhelming and it's dizzying. So I don't know. Where do you think the exhaustion comes from?
Well, I think there's a valid response and one that I think is not reasonable. And the valid one is to hate it. Like, it is okay to see all this coming, be afraid of it, be frustrated at the changes that might come to humanity, might be both for personal reasons, like maybe it potentially could have a negative effect on how you see yourself fitting into your own industry. That type of fear, I think, is completely reasonable, and people can voice that perspective. Or just being concerned about how it's going to shape society in general. Maybe, every time there's a big technological change, it means we operate differently in the world, and you can be worried about that and dislike what you see coming with AI. Those are reasonable criticisms. The only one that doesn't make sense to me is this dismissal of it, because it is just so. I think the reason it's getting tied to that similar NFT crypto hype feeling is almost a branding mistake of that AI became a brand on its own. And like anything that is, smart in a way, a computer doing something that has some human feeling to it, gets branded as AI. And it's just not in a lot of ways. AI is a very fuzzy term that can mean a lot of things. And even amongst professionals working in the field, you're going to get different definitions about what we're even talking about when we talk about AI. So I think people are hearing like AI is going to change everything. And there's large language models, there's like the generative image stuff, there's machine learning, and all of these are operating a little bit differently, and they mean that different products are going to come. And it's not like crypto where, maybe we're going to find a use for this interesting technology. It's already integrated into systems that we've been using for a few years now. And it's just a rapid acceleration recently of what the best of those systems are able to do. They're suddenly able to do so much more than they could before. But they had already proven themselves as useful. Now they've just become a lot more useful. So there isn't that question about, is this actually going to be part of our lives? It's just how it's surprising how quickly it seems like it'll be much more integrated into absolutely everything that we do.
Oh, absolutely. It was a shift in the evolution of what we conceive of as AI very quickly, that was proven out by us being able to use it. Because most of us, our experience with AI, as an assistant has been Siri or Alexa or Google Home or anything like that, which responds to a very narrow scope of instructions and responses. And I think that what my own definition of AI is that instead of just following the instructions that it's given, it learns to adapt and sort of give itself its own instructions that it assumes that will be better instructions than the ones that it was specifically given by a coder or a user or something. And obviously this is, like you said, this has existed for so many years, but it's just gotten really good and exposed to everyday consumers who don't need an engineering degree to use it, where we can like literally engage with it using natural language. And it's a beautiful demo. And I think that this is a really interesting consideration I want to ask you about, because we've got generative AI on the visual image side. I'm seeing my hands here. I wish if this was generative AI, I'd have 19 fingers. There's like the image stuff. There's the DALL-E and Midjourney Stable Diffusion stuff. And then there's the natural language large language model stuff, the Chat GPT and Bing and Llama or whatever Facebook has. And really the image stuff was released into the zeitgeist before the language stuff. And I wonder whether that was a mistake or whether that was backwards or whether that was a great thing and what was the impact of that order of being released. Because people get less upset about the language stuff, about the text, the natural language processing stuff. People are a lot less, a lot more forgiving with that stuff and feeling a lot less threatened because we engage with each other with text. Nobody doesn't use language in some format, and image creation is relegated to a specific domain. And so I think it can be a threat to people who make images as a matter of practice or for a living that something is doing it for you and, to a certain aptitude that might be challenging your aptitude. What do you think about that? What if they were what if they came out in different order?
Yeah, I think it was very surprising to all of us to see the images sort of leapfrog. I think we're used to seeing text. We were used to seeing text ahead of time because computers have been offering us text for so long. And so in that case, it was more a matter of the quality improving quickly. Chatbots were supposed to be a big thing 3 years ago. I remember Facebook was pitching that like all your customer support's all going to be chatbots, and it was, unfortunately, but it's all almost useless. Like, I'm sure you've run into a few of them. Like, it is just it's like searching an FAQ. That's all that it is. It's a slightly modified interface.
Totally. So, bad for customer support, just endlessly frustrating. Never knows what we want.
Bad for everyone.
Yeah.
And so we were used to there being something like this, and it was much more about, oh, wait, all of a sudden it is good. It can understand natural language and respond with it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know what difference it would have had. Although let's maybe push that a little later, the controversies, because I'm really interested in that difference of response. Whenever I post about the image stuff, there are a lot of people that are continually angry, and especially with what Corridor Crew has done recently, their anime stuff. But let's start a little earlier and try to figure out what are we talking about here, especially for anybody that maybe hasn't spent as much time in it as we have. Traditionally, the overall idea of AI, I think a lot of people get it from, movies. There's a movie called AI, which I actually haven't seen.
I need to go back and watch it because it was kind of a dud when it came out. But I want to watch it through a new lens. Like, go back and watch Her. I watched Her again for like a few weeks ago, and it's interesting how much it got and how much it missed. What
do you think it missed?
I think that in the world of Her, we were going to receive a lot of the information through our ears. Like, a lot of our interface with the larger information space through the internet was going to be delivered through just listening to an assistant talk to us. And I don't think that's happening because it's very slow. It's like a very inefficient mechanism for exchanging information. But it fully got I think that it's probably Her is probably 3 years into the future from where we are now in terms of our assistants, our AI assistants being a presence in our life that is persistent, that retains information about us and helps guide us and make decisions with a continuity from process to process. Because I don't think we're there yet. And I don't think that might be by design. That might be by limitation. Who knows? I mean, I know that's what I'm excited about. Is I don't want to have to context switch to a different AI every time I'm using a different tool or source of information or app or whatever. I don't want it to have a different user interface. That would be like having to use a different keyboard for every, text input, right. If in your email you use one keyboard, and our engaging with the AI is our user interface right now, and it will be for foreseeable future.
It'd be like in the days where you'd buy those rubber covers that have all of the Photoshop keys laid out on
right,
it.
or
but then
they
you
had them
pull
for
off the
Final
rubber
Cut, too.
and then you put it on the Final Cut one. And
That's
the idea
right.
is you're going to have a stack of these that you're swapping out. I don't know how people would use this. But
Yeah, we were going to skin physical objects to have different digital contexts. But I think that soon, hopefully, in the world of her and in our future world, we will have one continuous interface with anything that requires assisting us with a digital tool or a digital source of information.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, having one primary input. Although an interesting thing just hearing you speak about it, it sounds to me like you have a little more optimism than I necessarily do, because I'm fascinated by it, and I want to know everything I possibly can. I want to be a part of it as it moves forward, but I'm also nervous. I'm not convinced that it's going to be all positive. Even just on a small scale, like just look at the individual getting a little her in the ear, not sort of distorting things socially.
Sorry, you have one earbud, just like Joaquin Phoenix does in the movie.
I mean, we're surprisingly close already. But that, just that distortion of what happens in the movie of that, for anyone that hasn't seen it, the overall, not to spoil anything, but, they kind of have a romance. He falls in love with his AI. And I actually think that's a very real problem. That 100% is capable of happening.
Oh, absolutely. There's a startup called Replica where people are apparently becoming incredibly attached to their assistants, to their bots.
And so all of this is referring to what traditionally would be thought of as general AI, which is not exactly where most people.
Generative AI,
sort of like human level, like
AGI,
AI,
it's called. Yeah, artificial general intelligence. Yeah, that's what they're referring to.
Which is what I think most people imagine that all of it is. And that's like the stated goal of OpenAI. That's what they want to make, right? Like all of this is to have a human level and general intelligence, meaning that it's not specific to one category. It doesn't just play chess. It doesn't just create images. It can think and reason and be creative in similar ways to how humans are, and then effectively instantly surpass us. That's part of the interesting challenge, is that as soon as it's at par with human, it's inherently also surpassed us because it's already better at certain things. I mean, mathematics being a simple example.
Right. The singularity, as envisioned by Ray Kurzweil decades ago, was the point at which machines become as smart as us so that they can figure out how to make themselves smarter than us. And that's the event horizon. That's where they surpass, which he forecasted as 2030, right? That's the year that he kind of marked. And it feels like it's reasonably on target. 7 years from now, AGI seems plausible.
Yeah, I think so too. When I think about it, I think 3 to 10 years sort of, a lot of it's depending on how you define it, because I know different groups of thinkers will categorize it differently. And in some cases, they'd already say that we're there depending on the parameters you're looking for with that intelligence. But I think it's hard to deny that some level of it will be around the corner any minute now. And probably the biggest missing piece from her is that memory that is able to track its own conversations and interactions, remember who you are, remember what you like. That's a big missing chunk still.
In her, you remember how he's onboarded into what they call it an operating system, which is, and he plugs it into his computer or whatever. He downloads it into his computer, which is that cool, future sort of Apple meets IKEA, desktop display. He downloads this OS, and the OS basically says, "Can I have permission to go through your entire digital life?" And he's like, "Sure." And then it's like, "Okay, now I know everything about you. I'm Samantha. I sound just like Scarlett Johansson. And how are you not going to fall in love with me right now? Because I'm just a figment of I'm you in a form that is incredibly appealing, like sexually and acoustically appealing. And like I just think I think it's so funny that in that world of her, he just sees a billboard at the train station and it's like announcing this new AI. Oh, that's cool. I think I might try that. I might download that because, but it kind of feels a little similar to where nobody was really expecting this.
And to a lot of people that weren't following this development, or even to people that were following it, did feel like this, just like, oh, it's just here. I mean, I remember the first moments I showed it to friends. It was just like around a dinner, and I was like, look at what this text box can do. And the example I showed was, I was like, okay, write in Instagram caption about, we were on a trip, and I was like, write it about Thailand. And it writes one, and the guy I'm with is like, this is great. This is an Instagram writing tool. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, it can do anything. It's like, but it can do hashtags as well. And I'm just like, yeah, it can do hashtag. I think for a lot of people that aren't thinking about the higher level stuff about this, it's like, how is this a product? How does this fit into a really specific set of things where my head is at currently? And it's going to be, it just does have this strange like consumer product relationship where if you've been thinking about it since childhood, which I think both of us probably have, it feels much bigger than that, right? It feels like a piece in the puzzle of a story that's been in the making since we got interested in computers.
Yeah, since you bring that up of dreaming about it for our whole lives, I think that it's something I've been thinking about a bit, which is, what is the psychological profile of somebody who's been obsessed with the future of AI for a long time, maybe their whole life. And I think it's those of us who are very excited and attracted to the idea of having a companion, some entity that understands us, that we can help shape its understanding of us, that's not necessarily as complex as another human with its own needs and complications and miscommunications and everything, because the promise of tech is that it'll understand what we need from it. That's what tech has always been.
Let me ask you this. Do you enjoy character building in video games? Like, do you like that step at the start of the game where you get to choose the hairstyle and the clothing?
To be honest, no. Like, it's not something that I'm not a games person. So, I enjoy writing characters into the work that I do. I enjoy styling characters, fictional characters, and sort of building worlds around them. So I think it's a similar thing. It's just different context.
Right. Well, and the way that you describe it actually pretty well captures my concerns about it, that there'll be that synthetic personality will just be much more appealing, especially to young people. I think about myself using a tool like this. Like, let's say use the version that's 3 years away, where this is integrated into Siri. I could see myself getting really caught up in it because talking to real people was hard. It was a lot more challenging than everything I was doing on the computer. Playing video games and talking to NPCs was a lot more comfortable. And I think it's going to be so appealing to have a synthetic being that does understand you, that how do we talk people out of spending all their time with it?
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I think it's valid. I think that there's a lot of fiction that's around this idea, including the movie AI. It's, the little AI David, Haley Joel Osment, is a robot that was like purchased for a little boy as a companion. And there's like a lot of movies about that similar kind of thing. I think Megan, the horror movie, I don't like horror movies, sure, but I think that's what it's about.
It's kind of the same. Yeah.
I think that I think of it differently. I have a therapist and I talk to her every week, and she guides me and helps me navigate things that, decisions that I have to make, and helps me process a lot of what's going on in my life. I think that in its highest form, that's what an AI can be to every single one of us, is in a sense a therapist. It can be a life coach. It can be a like sort of medical adjacent practitioner. It can help you make good meals. It can assist you and guide you through all these different ways. But it's still, my therapist is still my therapist. She's not my friend. What she does help me do is be better with my own friends. She helps me be better for myself so that I can relate better with other people. And I think that in its highest form, that's what an AI companion can do for everybody, is be there for us when we need them, when we need guidance, so that we can be better when we're without them, so that we can be better with each other. That's why I'm optimistic. That's why I see that OpenAI, Sam Altman, AGI, extremely utopian vision for the world, is that I think that in its best form, AI can be therapy for every single one of us. And think about what the world would be, how different the world would be if everybody had if everybody had a guide, right, to sort of like managing life better.
Well, to imagine your side, to give a little bit to that argument, the best version of this should also understand that the repercussions to a human of spending all their time only socializing with an AI would be negative. And right. I think it's something almost missing from a lot of the time that we talk about something that would be human level intelligence. It can go through all the reasoning that we do. It wouldn't have some roadblock where it's like, it would understand that like humans need sunshine, humans need other humans around them. It wouldn't be limited to being selfishly trying to just like, unless ads are part of it, but just spend more time with me. Like, let's just hang out all the time. Hopefully it would push you towards something better. But I'm just generally skeptical of any utopian vision of any kind of future, because it's very easy for cracks to form that we weren't expecting, and we end up somewhere that isn't that best case scenario.
Oh, absolutely. I was utopian about social media as well. Like when Twitter first came around, oh, what a beautiful way for us to all interconnect, and understand achieve greater understanding of each other and humanity. And there were all these cracks, right? And the cracks got filled by the worst actors. So is there the potential for that to happen? Absolutely. But what you sort of hope for is that a couple of things. Number one, there's a way to build a sort of an ethical code into the technologies that are developed, into the models that are used, that our own, companions are sort of adhering to. And number two, what it might just be that in the aggregate, each of us having our needs met in this way, in this new technologically enabled way, will be enough, regardless of what the ethical moral code is of each of these models that we base the AI off of. It might be enough to sort of propel us forward towards being better with each other. If I have my needs met, then I might be better at helping other people have their needs met. And I think that's the promise. I mean,
it all sounds great. I hope you're right.
And that's why we don't want ads to creep in, right? We don't want it to be corrupted. And we have an interesting, useful model of how a previously utopian, optimistic technology got corrupted and toxified, and it resulted in horrible things happening.
Well, and part of my concern too is looking at the Bing rollout, which was, from Microsoft's perspective, did not go the way they wanted. It ended up having some pretty affectionate and aggressive conversations that they did not want to be happening on a, multi-billion-dollar search platform. And their inability to foresee or control that ahead of time is a bit of a sign of how little understanding there might be from some of the major players working on these projects. Oh, I feel I'm going to sneeze. And that this just may not be in their control as much as we would hope, that the pressure to release it at speed is just too intense for them to resist because somebody else is right behind them releasing a competitive product. I also want to put a little timestamp on when we're doing this as well. Like, we're recording at a moment where just recently GPT-4 was announced, Midjourney 5 samples are out, and I don't want to be talking about the news, but just if for anybody listening in the future, like this is where we're coming from. Bing just came out. We are basically at the point where it literally feels like yesterday. This was just the fall, and now we're in the spring where the text got good. And already we're at large commercial projects being released fully to the public, which I think is part of even my concern is I look at the abilities of this and seeing some of the things that GPT-4 is able to do as well. And I'm like, putting this into the hands of literally everybody absolutely has some major risks to it as well. You know, it would be different if this was a sort of a more limited release. Maybe it's even if it was just expensive enough that it was only in the hands of businesses, less people would be able to monkey with it. And I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, no, they're constraining it a little bit. Like GPT-4 access is, my understanding is that it's limited to people GPT plus subscribers. You know, you
$20,
you pay $20
so
bucks
it's
a month.
I wasn't paying before. I just paid it to get in. Yeah.
Right. Sure. And also access to the API is being rolled out. So I don't have access to the API right now. I have access to GPT 3.5 API, which is a really great one. And then also this new model, the GPT-4 model the tokens cost 10 times as much as the previous version. So they are sort of like, they're constraining it with economics a little bit as well. I think that they're trying to be careful. And hopefully it works. But I do think that the principle is correct to help people make useful things with it. And it really, in the context of history, it feels like when the iPhone SDK had just come out and people were building apps, and it was overwhelming very quickly, right? It was overwhelming. What apps should I use? And like entire magazines Macworld would be dedicated to like, here are the apps you need to be using. And it was because it was so exhausting. It was I think that's kind of where we are in parallel with AI right now.
Well, let's do a little bit of a check of like what has been interesting so far. I was looking at the, kind of the dates of announcements, and we're actually about a year into things being really in the mainstream in terms of, it was about a year ago that DALL-E 2 started really circulating and people seeing what it could do. The text stuff is a lot more fresh, but we've had the image stuff for a while. What has been your impression 1 year in terms of like, what do you see people actually using? What are some real world applications that have been interesting? Because I've still found myself playing more than using for any sort of heavy lifting. And I feel like I'm the perfect person to need this because I need to do creative writing and visual production, and I'm not good at illustrating, so having a computer do it for me is helpful. And there are so many things that I've found that I'm like, I see all the promise here, but I haven't really created many things that I couldn't before. So I don't know, what's that year been like for you?
It's a great question. My context is that for those who don't know, I founded a creative studio called Sandwich that makes commercials mostly for tech companies. So I've been working with cutting edge tech for the last almost 13 years. And we've been working with AI companies for probably 6 years, right? Very recently we did a commercial. Within the last year, we did a commercial for Jasper, which is the AI writing tool for marketing, specifically for marketing purposes. And when I worked with Jasper, I didn't have quite a grasp on what was about to come, what was about to happen, because it just felt like very cool. Okay, so it can take your writing and it can generate it into a style that is better for customer-facing stuff, or it can help you do support emails, or it can help you do client outreach or social media posts. That's very cool for marketers. Great for marketers. I didn't quite understand that it was going to be wide-reaching like it is. Now, as soon as I started to see that the technology can be shaped and you can take Stable Diffusion and with a little bit of Python code, you can train it on your own images and make really cool stuff based on your own face or like my family's. Or, one thing that was fun for me to do was I used Dream Booth, which is a way to train Stable Diffusion. I trained it on all of the team portraits from my company's website. which are all of the portraits are shot in a very specific sort of style. And then, like, I trained a model on these portraits, and then I said, basically, like, gave it a prompt to create more of these team portraits, and it just started inventing people, a lot of whom looked like real people with weird quirks and eccentricities, who are all on the sandwich team now. And it was, it was incredible. It was so funny to watch. But that was before all the text stuff started happening. And then like, when that first wave of innovation happened with DALL-E and everything, the ad world was saying, okay, cool, we can use this for reference imaging, we can use it for making decks, anything that we would usually go to a library for, or screen grabs from movies or whatever, we can just generate images. Okay, fine. Then when the tech stuff started happening, that's where it really took flight for me, because then it becomes a writing assistant, then becomes a creative tool that you can incorporate in your own creative practice, not in the sense that it's going to replace you, but in the sense that it's going to augment your capabilities. It's going to make everything that you do maybe slightly easier, or maybe a lot easier. And now I belong to this really awesome community. That I found this person. Her name's Rachel Woods. I found her on TikTok. She's an AI. She was a former data scientist and startup founder. Now her mission is to help people understand all of the new AI stuff and it's not for a specific purpose. A lot of the influencers you see out there are just like, here's how you can, it's get rich quick stuff, and mostly in marketing. Yeah, but she's all about the education and the knowledge sharing. And so she created this community, and it's on Slack. It's called the AI Exchange. And it's such a beautiful place to be, because everybody there just wants to help each other learn and wants to share what they have done recently with all the tools. And yeah, there are a lot of marketing people in there that are like, I used it to train it on my style of responding to business leads, and then generate a whole set of new leads. Or responses or outreach or whatever. I'm having a bad time. I'm having a hard time.
This is actually a good example of what I worry about, though, is that, like, as that, even with emails or script writing, I know that I'm worse at navigating cities because I really lean into Google Maps, and I love maps. It's very helpful to me. It's how I get around in life, but it has made my mental model of cities terrible. And that will happen with communication as we write less of it ourselves too. I don't want the whole show to be just me injecting wet blankets on everything, because I actually don't really.
No, wet blankets are really important, because, like, on the other side of that wet blanket is a dry blanket, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like, I think if you're identifying problems along the way, then you're just one step closer to a solution. It's really important to bring all this stuff up. So, for instance, if you think that we're going to become weaker communicators when we start relying on AI to communicate on our behalf, then what's the solution to that? We try to engage with AI that helps us retain our strengths in communication.
So it needs to have some built-in level of not understanding what we say. So it's like, huh? Pardon?
I think that's,
makes you clarify more often.
You're making a joke, but I think that is it the Socratic method? That's part of the user interaction with AI, is that it gets better when it asks you questions. Because what people, a lot of the skepticism, the healthy skepticism that came with people, the first wave of people trying out GPT and saying, boo, this sucks, is when they give it one prompt and they expect a perfectly formed answer, almost like it's a search engine, right? Where you type something into Google, you expect it to give you exactly the right list of 10 things that you needed. But it's not that. It requires dialogue. It's communication with the machine, and the machine is there to help it solve your problems. And I think once people started to understand that they can help shape it for their own benefit, that's when it started to really to click for a lot of people.
A version of that we have just seen previewed is both Duolingo, which I'm using right now, so it's especially relevant to me,
What are you
showed
learning?
off their Polish, learning Polish or trying to.
Great.
But it will now have this conversational chat element that, you know, asks you in your native language, like, how would you say this? And you respond back, and it guides you through natural text of like why the decision you made was close but not quite right, because you might conjugate this verb differently, and it will have that dialogue that you're describing, all in an effort to teach you the language more effectively, which that example would absolutely be more effective than the more simplistic way that it teaches now. And then the other example was Khan Academy announced that they'll be integrating this as well. So if you're going through, their example was that you're going through some math tutorials and you click the little chat bot and you're like, I need a little bit of help with this. And it will look at the question and prompt you with questions of like, okay, well, you know, in this case, like what would the denominator be? Like, it's going to basically give you clues like a video game, but completely context aware. And you can have that conversation back and forth like you would with a human tutor, so that it is still having you reach for that information in your own mind. It's not just providing the answers, but walking you towards a better understanding of the topic. So seeing those examples does make me feel a bit more hopeful, because that's something that could suddenly be available to everybody, allow teaching and tutoring to scale in a way that it's never been able to before.
Absolutely. And we are still in the phase of learning how this UI works, right? How to even basically type or use the mouse. I remember when I set up a Mac for my grandma years and years ago, because she was newly on her own and I thought she needed to have email. And I had to teach her, like, the little arrow on the screen, that does what your hand does when you're, and then what do I do? And then I just hit that button, and she had to learn it from scratch. And it was so bizarre from a technological perspective, because these things that we take for granted, somebody else comes to fresh. And I think that's kind of where we are, is we're learning this UI. So we know, like, what are the rules? Like, can I ask it to ask me questions so that it understands more of what I need? And I think further down the line, the AI will know to do that itself. And GPT-4 already knows to do that itself. I saw somebody on the AI Exchange screenshotted a thing from earlier today that there was a seminar, like a video seminar. They used a tool to auto-transcribe it, threw it into GPT-4 to summarize it. But then GPT-4 shared the summary in outline form and said, it didn't really give you good example. GPT-4 said, this person didn't really give you good examples of the principles that it talked about. So here are a few of those. Based on my understanding of what it talked about, here are some good takeaways for you. Like, that's mind blowing. That's the tool figuring out how to make itself a better tool.
Right. It is mind blowing. I mean, maybe I should have reserved a whole section of this podcast to just us saying wow for a while, because
I know
it's going to be so easy as this stuff. Like, why isn't this whole episode just started off with a moment of silence for the amazement of where we are right now? That's a good point. Like, if we do more of these, which we should just have a wow segment in every episode. Yeah, I mean and I think that's what a lot of people are bored of seeing, is all the wows, because for some reason they're not as wowed as we are. But even the best example of this to me is the moment of all of the selfies. Like, you were talking about Dream Booth. I was playing with that as well before the apps started doing it, and I wasn't getting the best results. Yeah, I got better results through Lensa. But still, that selfie moment happened, and I have never seen a meme burn hotter and faster, and then it was done. And everybody's like, great, okay, I made some goofy selfies. Like, now what? Like, this AI thing is so overhyped, because I'm like, what do I do with all these selfies that I just made? It's like, right. Do you not see anything past this? I mean, like, this ability to train it to understand any subject, and not just you, but your product or your house, or it can understand anything that you train it on and generate anything you can imagine around this. Like, I mean, and it's like, it's right there. It is so close. Like the example that goes through my head the most, and I haven't had anywhere to really express this, so maybe I'll try to take a second to describe it here, but is, I used to do web design, and actually my background was in stock photography. I stock photos, my first job out of college, and then Getty Images. So all of this like image libraries being replaced is really interesting to me. But in that web design era, like those tools, I could see that happening very quickly, where it's like, give me 20 layout ideas for a restaurant website. And obviously that's like relatively simple. It can draw all the boxes and create all the shapes. And it's like, okay, cool. Now start filling them in. Give me a ton of color options. Give me sad color options. Give me classy. Give me funky. Give me, the image, obviously the images are generated, but they can be generated based on the food photos that you trained it on. Like, take a photo of all your dishes just with a point and shoot camera and a flash. Now give all of those good lighting. So it looks like the food, but like make it look pretty. Take those same kind of photos of all your staff. Okay, now make them look like they're shot by Annie Leibovitz. All of and that's maybe a little more advanced, but like what could happen right away as well is, choosing font options. There's no reason that it can't understand that, because already if you go into Midjourney, you can say design a website for whatever category. I was trying it for like a replacement for my wife's blog. I was like, give me a fashion blog and make it light and airy. And they all look great. They look like real good websites that a designer would create. Now just professionalize those tools so that a real designer can expand upon them and work with them and develop them further. And that stuff blows my mind. And it does not remove the creative person from the process, but it just means the amount that one person could create is just exponentially more. And we're so close to that.
We're very, very close. And some of these tools exist and some of them don't work great yet, yeah. But we're still present in the process, like you said, as editors, which we will hopefully be for a long, long time. We're the ones who get to make the decision to publish or not, or choose this one over that one. And if what we are as creative people, as editors anyway, if you're a photographer, you're shooting 1,000 pictures and choosing one that represents your work. If you're me, you're shooting for hours of dailies and you're assembling it together into 2 minutes of the best stuff assembled in the right order. I think that the decisions we make are the very human part of the process, hopefully. And, there's a future where algos take over that part of the process too, and they optimize on our behalf, and they say, well, okay, these are your 5 options, but you're going to want to use option number 2 because that's going to perform the best. That's going to algorithmically, yeah.
I A/B tested it with my AI friends, and they liked it.
Yes, exactly. Oh gosh, the demo from the GPT-4 announcement yesterday, the one where he hand sketched a website, right? Because GPT-4 is what they call multimodal now, in that it interprets image as well as text. The guy sketched out a rough wireframe of a website that tells you a joke with ink on a notepad, took a picture with his phone, sent it through the Discord interface to GPT-4, and GPT-4 turned it instantly into HTML or, working JavaScript that he published in. It's now a joke-telling website within seconds. Right? Oh my God, bizarre.
What's so hard to imagine, what I can't wrap my head around, is that this recording will be a time capsule of these first impressions. And yeah. I mean, we can still go back to, MacBreak Weekly from when the first iPhone was released, and, people's expectations before the announcement and impressions after it was announced. And it all sounds so quaint now because of how far we are.
Yeah. Remember when Steve showed off the glassy swipe on the iPhone and everybody in the audience goes, whoa.
Yeah. All he did was swipe. And yeah. Well, that's the thing. Everything we're saying right now will be versions of that quickly. I mean, the iPhone, totally. that announcement just happened. Like, I mean, it's 10 years ish, but that's really nothing.
16 years ago. Yeah.
16 years ish. Okay, I can't count anymore. But I mean, we're going to have the same impression with everything we're talking about now. It's going to seem trivial and quaint. And can you believe we ever our imaginations were so limited back in 2023. And that's so hard for me to wrap my head around. Where will we be at to be looking back on this as so trivial? I mean, maybe this is even why I have a hard time talking about it, is I just have such a feeling of like, all I want to do is stare up at the sky with my mouth agape. Like I don't know what else to do.
It's hard to, I mean, it's so fun to dream. That's like the best feeling. There's so much dopamine that what happens when you go, oh, because this is a diversion. It's fun to dream, but it also gets in the way of actually making stuff. And that's where there's like a little bit of a trap. I heard on, I think it was on the Ezra Klein podcast, somebody talking about why does dopamine happen? What's the purpose of dopamine? Why do you get a rush of dopamine when you're a mouse and you hit the lever and you get a pellet? And then why does that start to decrease over time? You would think that every time you get a pellet, you get the same rush. And the best working theory is that dopamine exists because it happens when we get to change our understanding we get to change our predictions of the near future based on a new working model, right? That if something happens and it surprises me, and then suddenly I say, okay, there's a larger chance that my future will be happier instead of sadder, that creates a rush of dopamine because now I have a new, fun understanding of what the future might be. And so we get a rush from that because there's an imperative for us to do that because it makes our chances of survival higher. But when you stop evolving your model and your understanding of the rules of the world, you're going to stop feeling that rush because your model's already established. And so we're in this incredibly dopamine filled world right now where our models and predictions of the future are getting so inspired every day. It's like it's an unrelenting pace, the innovation that's happening, and it feels so good. But at the same time, it's preventing people from like, okay, what do we do with it? Like, you need to use it. That's what the tools exist for. They're not just to be a demo and make us feel good about the future. We have to actually use them to make stuff.
That fits in pretty well with, a lot of things I think about often. I don't know, I had a better response to this. This is actually a lot of the reason I've always known that tech was the right choice for me to be interested in. And actually part of why I'm surprised that it feels like it's much more popular than it used to be, but relatively speaking, most people only mildly care about tech news. But when you follow that news, like Apple being a great example, every time you check the news, it's good news, almost. Whereas if you're following politics, it's always bad news, right? Like the rest of the world is very up and down, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get when you open a newspaper, but when you flip to the Apple section, you're like, oh, cool. So it got faster, it got smarter, it got better. It's going to let me do my job better. It's a higher resolution. Like everything is always just this march of progress that becomes addictive for exactly all the reasons that you're talking about. And it's hard for me to even imagine going back or I don't know. It's just it's such we are so used to it that it also makes me wonder if it blinds us to some of those potential downsides as well, that it's like, we are so hooked on this progress and this ever evolving, these shifts that, I mean, when I hear people that don't like AI talk about like, well, we shouldn't do this, or, I don't even know how you phrase it to say like, maybe this is something we shouldn't do. How do you propose doing that when it's that millions of individuals are separately all equally excited about this and are all able to act on it on their own? Like, it's not, everything isn't so top down that you could just pull the brakes. Like AI, this is happening. So when I've had negative responses, like on Twitter, especially, we can touch on some of the negative responses to image generation. I'm just like, well, what do you want to happen? It's not going to stop. And if I don't if I'm not doing it, the guy next to me is doing, like, we're all doing it. And it's not so clear that it's not clear that the impact is negative at all. Like, it might be a purely positive impact. So, I don't know. I guess I'd love to circle back to what we were talking about earlier, that what's happening with that frustration about image generation. And, maybe the starting place is, have you watched what, Corridor did with the anime video? Have you seen that yet?
Using Runway ML. Yeah, sure.
Well, was it Runway? So mostly they were training Dream Booth on videos of themselves and using Vampire Hunter D as all of the source material to create an anime style, and they applied it to the videos of them.
I thought that they were using Runway tools. And they shot themselves on like a lot of green screens, in costumes and stuff. Yeah, I thought that was all Runway stuff. But
Runway might have been involved. I know there's like 6 different moving pieces. It 100% wasn't one tool. They did a super in-depth, if you subscribe to their paid platform, they do they refer to as a click-by-click walkthrough of everything they did to do it. But the end result is you watch something that basically looks like an anime, and it generated some of the most anger I've seen around any of this yet. And to me, it's just so misplaced. It's exactly the wrong place to be frustrated, because for one thing, there's a small independent team. They're not a big studio. They're not pretending that they invented all of this, and they're publishing every step of how they do it. They're sharing and educating. And, there are questions about copyright. Absolutely. It is good to have those conversations. We should be having them, but it felt like there was this pile on because they were the first to execute something that looked professional, to be just so angry that what I saw as a bunch of comments is they should have hired a team of animators to do this. I'm like, I think that would defeat maybe that's not the point of this video, and it probably wouldn't have happened because they can't afford a team of animators. That's the whole point, is now a small indie team can create an anime.
Well, I think it's kind of a nuance to the image creation field, as opposed to the overall of AI. I think when it comes to the general AI concern is that people assume that AI will act on its own behalf with its own motivations and not exist for our behalf or for our benefit. And I think that's kind of that's fear of it will replace us. That's take my jobs, that kind of fear.
Yeah.
And I think that I would hope that people will shift that. Oh, and also that there's going to be limit to access these tools, for that not everybody will have them, that it's only for rich people to get richer, and that there's an assumption that it'll just be too expensive or a limited access. I think that once people understand that the potential of these tools is to guide and assist everybody, people will sort of be more on board. That it's not going to replace us. No matter what your context is, there's a way that AI will help you do things that you're already doing, but easier and more.
Since you work in the creative world specifically, I guess how do you see that coming to exist in the exact same things that you're doing right now? And especially specifically, I think it's worth touching on the copyright stuff a bit on the image side. If you would you feel comfortable enough to generate something and use it within a commercial project you're working on right now? Where would you draw the lines of this I wouldn't allow, this I would? Just overall, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm very protective of my kind of IP, my creative style. And I know that Sandwich has a style that I helped develop. And I see that style sort of replicated sometimes by others. And I kind of get grumpy a little bit about it. And I think that if my style was ever commercialized without my participation, I would find that threatening. So if I'm one of those illustrators or photographers whose work has been modeled, and then made freely available to anybody to reproduce, especially if those people are making money from these reproductions, yeah, that pisses me off. I think that hopefully what comes out of this first wave is more protections of intellectual property, where it's not just Wild West and you can basically take anything that you want, and I think that, fingerprints of whose DNA is in a particular piece of work that has been inspired by another piece of work, those are hopefully technologically traceable in the near future. I don't know how. I don't know. Sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can tell specifically when a reference is so strong. And I'm not talking about AI. I'm just talking when you see
human world
commercial, human-made commercial that's shot exactly like a Wes Anderson movie. You go, okay, well, they were inspired by Wes Anderson. Is that unfair? I saw there was a Super Bowl commercial. Well, it doesn't matter. I won't get into that. Creative theft is what it is.
I think the version of this we would all get excited about, hopefully without any hesitation, is the idea that you have a team of artists, they generate new concepts, new IP, and train the models using human-made IP, and that is able to more quickly generate variations that you may not have time to previously. So I think a great example will be video games where, world building, it's like, okay, well, we need to build a whole town. Every house you walk into needs to have teacups. Here's the general style of teacups, and now we can generate 50 variations of it in a moment instead of having an illustrator draw each individual one. Obviously, this can apply to filmmaking as well. This can apply to branding. So many different areas. And hopefully there's always a team or an individual artist that got paid well to be the one training that model. They know why they're doing it. They're doing it for that purpose. And they get the credit for having been the originating artist that is part of it. That's where we want it to go.
Totally. And that's all access. That's the democratization of the tools that you and I benefited from in our own business, in our own creative practice. We wouldn't have been able to do what we did if the tools were just as expensive as they were 20 years ago or limited.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Right?
I have no idea what I'd be doing.
So how can anybody be mad at that? Just like you said with the outrage at the Corridor Crew stuff, how can anybody be mad that more people will have access to tools that let them make amazing things now?
And I think it's totally reasonable to have those conversations right now, but to also acknowledge this is the Wild West at this moment, and people that are just experimenting and showing what can be done, I don't think that's where the frustration should be directed. Showing us what can be done can give us a framework to make the laws or rules or just etiquette moving forward. But I don't think we need to take it out on them for exploring and pushing those boundaries, because that's how we're going to discover all this stuff. And I'd much rather Corridor do it first than Disney, or somebody that's really going to capitalize off of it. And, I hope those bigger companies are going to be much more cautious about it because they understand the potential IP risks. They wouldn't want to expose themselves to that kind of risk. But probably what will happen first, the first bad example of this will be someone relatively independent creating a new piece of IP that none of us have seen before. Maybe it's a comic book, and they are not, they mention that it's AI assisted in some way, or maybe they're not open about it. And then later it comes to light after Disney made the movie about it. They're like, oh, we found where this was trained off of, and it's from some other independent artist that didn't get the credit. That stuff's going to happen for sure, but it's going to be down the road and a little more, I don't know, edge. But
yeah. Well, and AI will assist in all that too, in pattern matching and saying this looks like that, and let's be very careful. But for years, for generations in advertising, if you make a piece of music for a commercial, and it's like for broadcast and it's big budget and stuff, and it goes through a real big agency, then the agency will hire a musicologist to deconstruct the piece of music and make sure that legally it does not resemble anything that they didn't have license for. I've had to do it on a few commercials. It's actually kind of a fun process, and it just gets a stamp of approval. Like, this is an original work. We're not going to get our ass sued
Yeah.
for
That's cool.
for this.
I didn't know it went like that. I mean, I know that exists. There's a great. I was watching the History of the World Part 2, and there's a great joke about a sound-alike. So I know that happens, but that's cool. That's like on every single commercial, somebody needs to sit down and look at it.
Certainly on the big ones, we just like nobody can take the risk. And I think that there will be like, especially if it's enabled by AI, then it'll become common practice. I think that authenticity and verification, and I'm not even getting into blockchain stuff. I just think that digital verification that happens automatically will become very common practice in our workflows in the future. And in ways that we sometimes touch lightly or don't touch at all. But I think, and it'll be good. It'll be for the benefit of all of us that make a living like this, that we have protections, both from people trying to steal from us and people that we might be stealing from on accident.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, yeah, good point that I would want it to assist me in not, accidentally taking something, that it would throw up warnings that it's like, oh, this is getting a little too close for comfort. We're kind of getting near the end, but before we finish up, I'd like to hear what would you hope for in the near term? Like, what are some tools that are just on the horizon that you could start using tomorrow? If you were to shift gears and start developing a tool, what's the AI tool that'd be most useful for you?
Which I am. I'm like having fun, sort of like playing around with no code tools right now to put stuff together, to bolt stuff together. So I was a long time ago, I was a FileMaker dork. And
Wow,
FileMaker was an application for making relational databases, and sort of like there was some automation built into it. And just, it was like a no code way of getting data to talk to each other for a specific purpose. And I loved that stuff because I needed it to help me do my first job better out of college. And I sort of like carried that with me into the future, is that, okay, if you're doing a job for whatever purpose and something is harder than it should be, start dreaming up a tool to help you make that task easier. And that's what I'm doing. And diving back into the world of development a little bit more, it's blowing my mind how many cool platforms there are for what they call, that's the category, is no code, for building stuff without code that is actually work, that's like large, relational, dynamic, commercial grade, highly secure. One that comes to mind is Bubble.io. Bubble is a great platform for building basically enterprise grade applications. You could use it just for proof of concept if you want. Another one is Softr, Softr, which is like a little bit more templatized, but there's the whole world of APIs out there that say, okay, my data is here. I'm using my hands again. My data is here. My web interface is here. My cloud server is here. Now, without using any code, connect all of them together and make them do a thing, or allow other people to come to this site and allow them to do a thing. And not only can I sort of like, with some effort, use to learn these no-code platforms to build something, we're very, very close to being able to tell AI to do that for us. And there's a category called Toolformer of AI tool, which is a tool that will learn how other tools work automatically, learn how an API is built, and then just do all that for you with the same principles as, here's a sketch of a website, now turn it into code. Tools that build themselves are on the horizon, and I'm super, super excited about that.
Yeah,
because the promise of that is that anybody can build anything. It's no longer your cousin coming to you and say, hey, apps, I have an idea for an app. I'll split the profits with you.
No, I mean, it does. It sounds amazing. It sounds like, I don't know, there's some lame rumors recently of what the Apple VR goggles are going to be, and that you'll just speak to them and you can create apps through voice. And I'm like, that sounds dumb. But Well, it sounds unrealistic in the way it was described in the rumors, but the way you describe it is much more interesting and much more realistic, and something that probably is pretty close to the horizon. The version I was experimenting with just last night was making film emulation presets for Lightroom, and I was just amazed that it understood what all the Lightroom sliders are, because I asked it to. I said, generate a film emulation preset for Lightroom that resembles Kodak Portra 400. It did. I adjusted all the sliders as it suggested, and it absolutely understands the tone response of that film stock. Because then I went back through afterwards and I was like, okay, show me Fuji Pro 400H. And it got that difference between what Kodak generally looks like and what Fuji looks like, and tied that into Lightroom, just in the chatbot that is not targeted to do any of this. It's not built to do any of this. So that was my very small example of it, but I know it's, already able to do more than that. And no, I'm going to check out the ones that you mentioned.
What was the output that GPT generated?
Written the way that a human would give instructions to do this. So it's like, open up Lightroom, go to the development tool, move the contrast slider here.
Yeah. So the API communicated with you. There was an API between GPT, you, and Lightroom. That's very cool.
Yeah. I needed to be there to bridge the gap. It couldn't generate the XML file yet, but
yeah.
I mean, maybe it could, and I don't know how to tell it to, but
it might be able to. I would assume that it could.
Yeah. But it could understand, like, if I asked it the right way, and it totally depended how I prompted it, I'd get totally different results. But I could also have it give me points on the RGB curves of, like, at first it gave me general responses of, like, lift the highlights and lower the shadows. But I asked it to be more specific, and it gave me point values to set the curve at to give it the tonal response of Kodak Portra 400, which is crazy. It's not that accurate yet, but like it totally gets it. And I mean, instantly we'll be able to take this further.
Yeah, and the innovation in GPT-4 is that it's supposed to get it, to use that term, far better than GPT-3 did. Like that's what people are saying is the hugest leap for GPT-4, is that it just knows more. It's smarter about knowing stuff like the law, or how Lightroom works, or how photography works, or how whatever technical knowledge there is. And it's getting better about not making stuff up too.
Yeah, which is that one's definitely helpful. What I would hope for is the next stage is I could really use like a solid, just like life organizer. Like, look at my emails, tell me when I'm available. That would help a lot. Another one that I'm surprised isn't good yet. The products exist, but none of them that I've seen are good. Is just basic image retouching. There's all these sort of standard things that you go through when you're like retouching an image for like commercial use. And usually it involves just like, removing blemishes that aren't usually there, flyaway hairs. There's all these little things that are totally standard. And I go through and I am still spending exactly as much time on it now in 2023 as when I learned how to do this back in 2005. I mean, the tools have almost not changed, and I still am sitting there manually clicking and dragging and selecting, even as Photoshop adds AI tools integrated into the program. I can't one click say like, give me a subtle, professional looking beauty processing to this image, and it still cannot do that. And I am kind of baffled how we haven't quite got there yet, because it shouldn't be this hard. But hopefully those two are on the horizon as well.
Well, every app that we use should very soon, if not already, have a bolted on natural language, GPT interpreter for what you require. But it all goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, which is like, I don't want a different interface on every app that I use. I want them all to have one interface, and that's mine. That's my
Scarlett
assistant
Johansson.
that I use to. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, no, it's true. There's something that's been interesting in advances of smart technology up until now as well, especially for creative fields, that a lot of this happens first on the phone, especially thinking about, say, Instagram or that TikTok filter. If you saw that insane recent one that
the teenage
people
one.
could like, you rub your eyebrow. Well, there's one that made you younger, but another was just a normal like makeup filter. gives you
I saw that
shapely
one too.
eyebrows and all that. Yep. But the way it glues to your face is perfect. It really, you can't block it.
Incredible tracking.
That's all only on phones. There's no professionalized version of this. And the way that filters have worked in Snapchat for years now, I could use that. I really could. That would be helpful for me in video production. But the professional tools for that are complicated. I mean, if you're going to do that in DaVinci Resolve, you're doing all this intense face tracking that takes a long time on a Mac Pro, and you have to understand how to change all the parameters, where Instagram can do it for free in real time. So I wonder if we're going to see something similar to that, where the really mass market consumer stuff is just continues to be way ahead of the professionalized software that is what I'm actually more excited about, but we're not seeing as much of.
Yeah, it's so interesting that there's that dichotomy that exists, that in the stuff that Sandwich does in our post department, how frustrating it can be for me on the outside to say, like, well, just make this happen. I can do it easily using this dumb app. We can all make transformers explode, but there's a correct way of doing stuff.
Do the basic rotoscoping that a phone will do live, especially the TikTok like green screen filter that just cuts you out with there's no green screen behind you, just understands that's the human, here's what I'm going to cut out, works great. To do that on the computer is, you can do it, but it's super time intensive, and you have to pay for a platform and like either use the free app or pay. I don't know. It's just, there's a very weird relationship between those things right now.
No, totally. Did you see the teaser that came out a couple days ago, Wonder Dynamics? Did you see that one?
Oh, yeah.
That was basically replaces motion capture over live action.
Like, do you think it was a real demo?
I would fucking hope so. I don't want to be lied to anymore. But just for the listener, the demo is you shoot something with any camera, with a phone or with a professional cinema camera in a live action environment with a human performing different motions and actions, whatever, just as a character, not wearing ping pong balls or a green screen suit. And then you probably with text prompts, you can throw a description of a character, a CG character, or you can send it an image of a CG character. Mm-hmm. And it will drop that CG character in performing exactly the same motions as the human did and replacing the human. Right. So it's cleaning it's doing cleanup of the performer, which is incredibly complicated to do. And then lighting and animating, modeling, rigging, lighting, and animating a CG character and compositing it into the frame.
The shocking part to me was the lighting, that it's able to, that it understands all the dimensions of the 3D subject in that environment and can determine where light sources are without having like an HDR scan of it. I do not get it. That's why I'm like, this just feels too good to be true. Like, we're not there yet. Right.
Well, I got to go to Apple headquarters in Culver City the other day. Mm-hmm. I got invited to a pro workshop that they were doing for photogrammetry, and the PR team says hello to you. By the way, they said, we love Tyler. And
thank you.
Of course. And I mentioned that I was going to be on your podcast, etc. And the demo that I got was pretty cool. They invited us to, there were 12 of us there. Everybody brought in an object. I brought in, it's from 1992 or about, it's a Sony Video Walkman that plays high video 8mm videotapes. This is my object. We put it in a little light box, took video of it with my phone, threw that phone into a processing app called PhotoCatch that turned it into a 3D object, a USDZ, which is an open source format for 3D objects. Then we dropped that 3D object into a Motion project, and yes, Motion is still around. Mm-hmm. And then the head of product on Motion, who was there, Tim, he helps me take the object and relight it against a live action background plate, which had very specific lighting. So because my video Walkman was universally lit, sort of globally well lit, it allowed us to turn off all that light and then relight it with virtual lighting within the scene in motion, and then basically track it into the plate, a moving plate. And it was a pretty damn good demo for something that had been captured on an iPhone and then done within a matter of 15 minutes. I love that crap. That's not even AI. That's just, yeah.
Well, yeah. So photo catch, because you've used Luma AI as well, did you see, because it's not creating a NERF, it's creating
it's not creating NERF.
More traditional photo scan.
Yeah, it's very traditional. It's basically photogrammetry, capturing the image and the geometry at the same time, and then projecting the RGB pixels onto the model. Right. So it just like really easily generates the model.
I mean, I've loved that stuff since forever, and it's always been useless to me. Like, I've been using Polycam since it came out, and I just scan things and never look back at it. Like, I don't know what to do with it. I'm just like, someday I'm going to want to walk through my old bedroom in 3D.
Oh, it's a classic.
I just keep scanning stuff, but
it's a classic. And even being there with the Apple people, it's a classic. We can't wait to see what you do with this. Even the GPT guy, GPT, like, I roll my eyes. It's like a bingo card thing. Every demo, every keynote, we can't wait to see what you do, which is code for we have no idea what to do with this.
We don't know. We hope it'll be useful someday.
I call a moratorium on we can't wait to see what you do with this. But I do have a feeling that it's going to be used frequently in AR stuff, with the glasses coming out, that there will be a need for consumers to turn physical objects. Well, that's not a good example because it's clear plastic, or clear glass. Turn objects into 3D models so that they can be projected into the physical space.
I was glad that I finally I did use one real world version. I talked about it on your podcast. So reminder, everybody go listen to All Consuming, but using Luma AI, I did a scan of the computer here in the studio for my MacBook Pro review. And I just, circled it a bunch of times, got a good 3D scan of the object and of the space. Then I created a physically impossible camera move as the opening shot, where it swirled around the computer and went up into the ceiling, which, I can't physically get there. And it's not the best shot in the world, but most people didn't say anything about it. Like, I think it generally just kind of passed. A few people asked how I shot that video. I think most people just accepted it as video. And that's on a relatively new, what's going to be a primitive version of it. Like, it is moving quickly and already looks a lot better than that one that I used. So I think we are going to be able to use this within a year. I think it's going to be able to show up in standard productions. There was also a McDonald's commercial. I don't remember her last name. Karen is this one influencer.
Karen X Chang, yeah.
Yes. I always forget her last name. And her work, just everybody follow her. Because, she's one of these people that I love, that passion for, something's new, what can I do with it? And she did a McDonald's commercial where they shot it on an Alexa, did the scan and ingested it into Luma AI, and it looks like a cinematic version of these photo scans or NERFs that we're talking about, where then afterwards you can just manipulate the camera and create the move as long as you've scanned it well in the moment. And I just love this stuff.
So my question for you on that, and we touched on this on All Consuming a little bit, is right now we're in this moment in technology where there's professional cinema and photography that is made with highly skilled people and expensive equipment. And then there's everything else on social, on TikTok, that looks like garbage all the time. And that's part of the fun of it. That's kind of what makes it so enjoyable to watch, is that it's just tossed away. It's so disposable and it's garbage, but it's really entertaining. And I'm wondering whether you think there's a time when the tools to do Karen X Chang style work will become so accessible to make look as good as what she's doing that the garbage aesthetic goes away. It either goes in one direction or the other. Does the cinematic work go away and everything has to look like garbage in order to feel authentic? Or does the garbage stuff start to look like cinema and everything feels expensive?
I think we're already on a path with that the garbage stuff looks cinematic. iPhones are moving fast, and there's a lot of situations if you just kind of walk around shooting them, you'll usually always spot the iPhone. It just behaves in certain ways that bigger cameras don't. But Apple could make a few key choices that would guide it towards something that would absolutely look not indistinguishable, but like a big camera. They are converging, and the cheap stuff is going to look great really quickly. I think the best example, and I want to talk to somebody that worked on this, but the cinematic mode announcement video where they did the Rian Johnson knockoff, they did the little whodunit with the focus pulling back and forth between the characters. I still go back, I watch that, I'm like, are they using the native camera? Like, are they using a normal iPhone, or are they running some special software on here? Because they're getting like a tone response that I don't typically see from an iPhone. Looking at the way that the sharpness is behaving, it's like they're able to scrape away some of that over sharpening. And I'm just like, how did they treat this and get that look out of it?
I would assume that they're using Filmic Pro, which gives you access to all kinds of controls that that the normal app doesn't, and that they're heavily post processing it.
But it doesn't support cinematic mode. The cinematic mode, that depth understanding is only in the native camera.
Is that right? So, oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure that they shot it just before the announcement of ProRes. So I'm sure they were using ProRes just before it was released, but ProRes doesn't give you that access either. You can't really, the image basically looks the same. You just have less compression. So you get less artifacting and stuff, but like the colors are effectively the same. There isn't a significant difference. So anyway, I want to know, and I want everything I do to look like that. But I guess my point is if you look at that video, once everybody can get that look kind of all the time, it's just going to be a matter of what story you decide to tell. That was your comment on the podcast as well. But it's all about what do you want to make? That's how good that's the limitation, what's the idea you had, or what's the idea that Chat GPT gave you for this, for this viral video?
What's the idea that the algorithm felt like you would enjoy the most?
Oh, so this is going to be, I guess this can't be a 5-hour show, but this is going to be the weird thing. We're going to have dueling algorithms of okay, there's an algorithm, ChatGPT is going to understand the TikTok algorithm and is going to be able to suggest ideas that will optimize to viewership algorithms. There's no reason that can't happen right away, and can suggest things that will be more popular. And okay, well, your next commercial should be like this because we saw that it got more views. And then what happens? Is the snake eats its tail? I don't know. It's it's coming too fast.
Yeah, and now the
show's already expired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
On that note, is this an okay place to sort of bring it to a close? I have to take my kids to a doctor appointment pretty soon.
Yeah. No. Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate it. There's nobody better I could have talked to about this stuff. I'm glad to hear you're following it more closely than I realized. Again, Adam Liskor, Sandwich Video, all consuming. Check out everything that he does.
Yeah. Sandwich.co is where you would go to see the work. And I used GPT to help me make a website for sandwich.ai as well.
Of course you did. Okay, I'm going to go look at that now. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Oh, man, Tyler, what a pleasure. Thank you.